we're pleased to start out our third session now, and the chair of the session is IGS trustee Susan Drucker, who is a professor, I believe, of journalism and mass media, if I remember correctly, at Hofstra University. It's all yours, Susan.
Thank you. So welcome to a session on people in quandaries. I love the title because it could really express my sense of my entire life. So it feels like a really appropriate session to have the opportunity to participate in. So we've got four interesting presentations, and I think everyone should take about 15 minutes. And the first presentation that we'll hear is a media ecological glance at resilience in the 21st century multimodal artistic environment. And that's Olena, Marina, and Igor Korolyov. And take it away.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dear Susan. Hello, dear Lance and all participants. Hello to everyone from Ukraine, from Kyiv. We are grateful to everyone for support, and thank you very much for the invitation and for the excellent organization of the symposium. Today, the results of his study have already presented our colleague and postgraduate student, Mr. Alexander from the Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv. And the results of our research I presented at the symposium in New York City in October. And today our presentation will be presented by Professor Olena Marina. And Olena, please.
Yeah, thank you, Igor. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Lance. I would like to support Igor in that, and we are really grateful to Lance Strait and all the members of the Institute of General Semantics that we are members of as well, for giving us the opportunities to present at the symposium. And I would say that we have already kind of a history, kind of a development within the symposia, various symposia of the Institute of General Semantics in terms of our research. Because our first research was actually the project that we presented. It started with, I think, COVID, and then we progressed into, it was COVID, it was media viruses, etc. with COVID, conspiracy theories. Then we progressed to kind of global challenges. So, and after that, last year, we presented on conceptualizations of refugee crisis, a part of global challenges. And so this year, we have decided to talk about resilience. So, because again, global challenges, all these traumatic situations, all these traumatic events that the world, I would say, have been packed with for the past decades. Yeah, it requires not only the description, not only the research, yes, of how this trauma is conceptualized, but it requires the description, the analysis of the resilience, yes, how people can adjust, how people can adapt, and how all of that is manifested in various kinds of semantic environments. And particularly today and previously, we were talking about multimodal artistic environment. So where in this case, resilience is conceptualized in poetic texts, mostly analyzed in the digital or symbolic environment, then some artworks, some music videos, etc. So this is just the slide that presents global challenges that we talked about. And today, again, we are talking about global challenges, but we are talking about global challenges in terms of resilience. So what you can see on this slide, I think that this slide is about colors. It's about green, it's about gray, it's about brown, etc. In the center, you can see a so-called tapestry of life, which represents or symbolizes more the concept of resilience. On the left, you can, I'm sure each of you has seen some pictures like that on the internet or just anywhere, the pictures which really symbolize, yes, or represent resilience, that it can be a hollow land, but still there will be something flourishing. There will be strength, there will be survival, there will be hope. So it is believed that, first of all, green, brown, and of course red, they symbolize or represent the concept of resilience. Looking at this slide, so you can see here a lot of different, at times we can see contradictory pictures. How do they come together? What is the logic here? It's, you can see a lion. Yes, we know the king of animals with its power and strength. So we can see an oak tree and roots, an oak tree which is quite resistible and resistant in different weather conditions. And it's lotus and monarch butterfly, which is quite strong, and it still flies from north to south in a particular season. The diamond and semicolon. What are they? Why are they here? They symbolize, they represent, they are believed to symbolize the concept of resilience. What about this slide? Yes, these are word clouds. We know very well the word clouds representing the concept of resilience. On the left, you can see the word cloud, which makes up the components, the verbal components, which make up the concept of resilience here are more of, let's say, positive, represent the positive side of this notion. Yes, you can see optimism, you can see motivation, you can see determination and positive thinking and a lot of other things. On the right, yes, the concept of resilience and even its visual representation is slightly, let's say, negative, to some extent, because resilience, if we look at the visual representation, it would be the strength, power, but what are these factors that cause resilience in general, that lead people to traumatic situations and that they have to express resilience further? So you can see even the word slavery, diversity, racism, and different things like that. So what are all those? Yes, all those are symbols, they are colors, they are words representing the concept of resilience itself. Not music, I've planned, but then I've decided to quit. Okay, so we live in the world of symbols. And here, of course, I come to this classical quote by Alfred Korzybski, "Map is not the territory." And all these symbols and the colors, right? There is a conventional link, conventional connection between resilience itself, right? And what stands behind it. So here we can also trace the interdisciplinary links between general semantics and semiotics, general semantics and cognitive science, yes? Like this very famous painting by René Magritte is always shown to demonstrate the link between the signifier and signified of a sign. When we map as not the territory, when we look at this pipe, yes, the painting itself, here the representation of the painting, it says, this is not a pipe, Looking at it at first sight, you say, oh no, this is not a pipe. this is a pipe, right? But in reality, it is not a pipe. It is its representation and one of the representations. Then we can trace here a link with cognitive science, yes, cognitive linguistics, cognitive grammar, in particular, Ronald Renneke, John Taylor. The book is represented here. Yes, it's about cognitive construal of reality. We all construe, we all interpret this or that, I don't know, thing, object, concept, whatever it is, in different ways, depending on our experience, depending on our background, and many things like that. So thus, also talking about the concept of resilience itself, you know, the word resilience, it's an abstract noun. We can't look at it, we can't see its color. We say that resilience is green or brown. Yes, it is generally accepted, but this is a conventional connection here, right? Conventional link. Or we say that lotus or lion, they represent resilience. But again, this is only our agreement. We can't touch it. It's not specific. It's not concrete. So, and again, in general semantics, Alfred Korzybski says that, yeah, man's achievements rest upon the use of symbols. We must consider ourselves as a symbolic semantic class of life. So, then I would say that the concept of resilience and its analysis of its representation in different types of environments here is complicated probably by the notion of resilience itself. You can understand that, So in general, this is just a very simple definition of what resilience is. It's more, as you can understand, of a psychological nature and given by the American Psychological Association and the dictionary. So, and in the easiest way, resilience is defined as the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. But generally speaking, resilience has a long-standing tradition. And scholars say that now it's the fourth wave that can be observed in the research of the concept of resilience itself. So as you can understand, resilience is research studied from different perspectives. Yes, it's an interdisciplinary notion. Thus, there's the biology of resilience. In psychology, I have just represented a definition of what resilience is. In sociology, so resistance is viewed also in sociology, in philosophy. There is an approach of ecological resilience linguistics. There is resilience linguistics and many things like that. So it's quite multifaceted. But I would say that talking about from what we have learned researching the notion of resilience is that in sociology, I would say, and sociology and ecological resilience, they offer a lot of links, interdisciplinary links for understanding resilience within psychology, within sociology, and actually media ecology itself, because sociology views resilience of a human being within sociological and environmental factors influencing the person and influencing their resilience, their ability to adjust, being strong, striving for survival, hoping, etc., in this or that traumatic or emergency situation. As you can understand, there are different types of resilience here. It is physical resilience, mental resilience, and definitely emotional resilience. So, and just a couple of words about what we have researched. So we have researched, as I have mentioned, a number of poetic texts, and they are multimodal in their nature because these were either poetic texts which were accompanied, it's all in the symbolic and digital environment of the internet. These are the poetic texts accompanied either by pictures or kind of representations of some paintings or videos and correspondently music, etc. And we focused on the resilience of people in, for example, wars or military conflicts which have been going on in the world. First, it's the war in Ukraine, a little bit of war in Gaza. Then we also focused on the refugee crisis and also a little bit of COVID, because it's interesting to see how this abstract notion, how this, again, symbol of how this resilience and its symbols, how they are represented, and how actually the concept of resilience changes within this or that environment, the environment of, so resilience within a military conflict, resilience within COVID, and resilience within a refugee crisis. So, and what you can see on the slide now is a piece of poetry. It is called not resilience but resistance. You can see it, but resistance is one actually of the components of resilience. And this is a poem written by the British poet Simon Armitage, right when the war started in Ukraine. And you can see it's accompanied, it was published in The Guardian, and it is in The Guardian on their website. So as the symbols of resilience here,
until 11:30.
Okay, so I have to stop. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah. You have about 1 minute left.
yeah, okay, perfect. So I will just draw a conclusion. Yeah, you can see some symbols of resilience here, like here it's the national flower, it's a sunflower. Yeah, it can be, so because the symbols, they are also culturally bound and influenced and nationally bound. Then here you can see nice metaphors like bullets, let bullets be birds. Yes, so cluster bombs burst into flocks, etc. Okay. So then one more thing is people. Okay, so to be resilient, people turn to poetry in general. So, and the same story, there are a lot of poems written by Gaza poets, yes, during the war, yes, so for their voice to be heard. Okay, and yeah, so our conclusion would be that resilience takes the faces and takes the forms, different forms and different faces in different environments. It is represented in the poetry in what we have analyzed. It is represented in a number of symbols. It is represented with various verbal components and non-verbal components, and it is like strength and adjustment, hope, adaptation, etc. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. A fascinating topic, and one that I'm sure there'll be lots of comments and questions about at the end. But now we need to move along, and we'll hear a paper entitled "What is Documentation and How Do You Study It" by Niels Windfeld Lund of the Arctic University of Norway.
Hi. I just have to do this. Can you see it? Or well, hello.
Hello.
I'm Niels Windfeld Lund from the University of in Tromsø, the northernmost university in the world, and I just published this book on documentation studies, and when I posted it on the list, Lance asked me to introduce the book. I'm new in semantics, and I don't know much about it. I'm coming from the library and information science world, where I've been in the last 50 years. So I hope it will be relevant and not too simple or for you, but we will see. What is documentation? That might be a simple question, but for me, whenever you in every second of your life, almost, whenever you will communicate and inform, when the baby is screaming, the baby is documenting. You cannot communicate and inform without using some means, your voice or your pen or your computer, and you always are producing a document, a scream, or like this photo, a meal, and a baby scream is a document, is a discrete entity, lasts a finite number of seconds or a number of slides here, or a number of beans and tomatoes. So almost any human expression is a document. And many are considering what is a document, and but it needs to be considered as a result of a documentation process. You are created in a social setting, conceived by someone, and created physically by someone.
Pop it back in. Oh, good. Listen to me.
I think let's make sure that all the everyone is on mute except our speaker.
Oh, yeah. And perhaps I'm coming to the most interesting thing now, because how to study documentation, and inspired by one of, of, of the most famous scholars in my country, Niels Bohr. He was not only a physicist, but well, he was also a very reflective philosopher, and he talks about complementarity, and I'm trying to see both communication, information, and documentation processes as free, complementary processes going along, and you cannot say that it's more communication than documentation, more information than communication. There are sort of 100% in there all the time. And when I have my students to study the documents, we are asking who are making the documents, and recently we have discussed who are actually making the chat GPT messages. Is it really a machine, or is it some human at the end? And how is it organized? It might be very primitive and simple, but how to conceive this meal? How do you consider it as a decent meal, depending on who you are, and with what kind of means are you doing this? And now I'm talking about a meal, but I have been talking about and studied operas. Who are making the operas? Is it the composer, or is it the librettist, or the musicians, or the singers? So it goes across many parts of the world, and here we have what people usually consider as documents. And I tried to tell the most principal things, and we have a community around this understanding, or different kind of understanding of documentation in the document academy founded in 2003, and we are meeting in Philadelphia here in September, where we are going to talk about the documents in the future. For instance, about what kind of documents are ChatGPT producing. Thank you.
Thank you. It really make me wonder the relationship between resilience and documentation. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that later.
Absolutely. Yes, sure.
Our next presentation takes us into looking at depressing and axiocentric environments, digital media, and its discontents. Adriana Braga of Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro. Yeah, Adriana.
Hello, Susan. Hello, all. It's a pleasure participating on this exciting event, this great initiative. Today I title my talk, Depressing and Anxiogenic Environments, Digital Media and its Discontents. Okay. In several modern languages, the word that designates illness is related to the notion of evil, for example, malady in French or illness in English. In free translation from Portuguese into English, we would refer, for example, to Alzheimer evil. Many may think that this classification of illness as evil results from the influence of Christian theology on medical and popular language. But historically, precisely the opposite happened, Nogueira says. It was the medicine of Hippocrates and Galen with their understanding of illness as disorder that provided the foundations for medieval Christian theology to think of sin as an essential disorder of the human creature's soul. Depression is starting to be considered the disease of the 21st century, according to the World Health Organization. This illness can be characterized for the organization in these terms. It's a common mental disorder estimated to affect more than 264 million people worldwide. It's the leading global cause of disability and contributes significantly to global burden of disease, affects women more than men, and in the worst case, it can lead to suicide. For the first time since the creation of the organization in 1946, mental illness is becoming the main target of global health policies. We could ask, what characterizes illness as a philosophical, theological, and medical concept? And what characterizes depression as such a prominent illness in this century along with its treatment methods? The Hippocratic classification of human personality into 4 ideal types identified each patient's propensity for certain illnesses. The melancholic type, for example, composed of thoughtful, introverted, and generally unsociable people, was considered the most prone to the condition that is today called depression, but which for many centuries was known as melancholy. The original meaning of this word is black bile, whose location was supposed to be in the spleen. In fact, the color black continues to be associated with the idea of depression to these days. About the consumption of antidepressant medications, reliable data regarding these issues are the stratospheric levels reached by the sale and consumption of antidepressants in almost all countries worldwide. The extraordinary economic and political power of the global pharmaceutical industry, with its variety strategies for co-opting doctors and researchers in the field, the excessive prescription of antidepressant is part of the broad trend towards medicalization in contemporary society and has its origins in the commercial interests of the industry. The idea that technology produces disturbing consequences in society pervades the whole McLuhan's work. Marshall McLuhan develops his idea interested in the effects that technologies produce on the human psyche, and McLuhan is interested in understanding the traumatic consequences of technologies on subjects and society, which, according to him, produce a kind of identification with technologies which become extensions of our own bodies. Technologies have structural effects on our psyche, which in turn has consequences for the organization of society as a whole. This idea appears in the writings of Harold Innis as well. According to Innis, cultures, quote, cultures using new media are characterized by profound disturbances. And McLuhan said, quote, new technology disrupts the image, both private and corporate, in any society, so much so that fear and anxiety arise, and it's necessary to begin a new search for identity. McLuhan suggests that every new technology diminishes sensory interaction and consciousness precisely in the area provided by the technology. A kind of identification occurs between observer and object. End of quote. Recent studies by the Royal Society for Public Health indicate that rates of anxiety and depression among young people aged 14 to 24 have increased by 70% in the last 25 years. The results indicate that posting and sharing pictures on Instagram has negative and compromising consequences on the quality of sleep, self-esteem, and insecurity of young people around the world. According to research carried out in the United Kingdom, around 70% of young people say that Instagram has promoted low self-esteem and dissatisfaction with their own self-image. In the case of young women, this percentage rises to 90%. Cyberbullying, cancel culture, which often escapes the scope of social media and gains a national scale, is identified as one of the causes of anxiety and depression, especially in young people. According to a survey carried out by a Brazilian institute, 50% of young Brazilians, social media cause symptoms such as sadness, anxiety, and depression. And among young people, pessimism towards technology is greater compared to adults. And among the reasons were the fear of automation in terms of the reduction of jobs due to the technological advancement of machines. This study sought to investigate social interaction occurring in internet environments dedicated to the topic of depression and anxiety. The objective is to discuss the particular ways in which interactional arrangements are organized, as well as the relationship of belonging that develop in the Instagram profiles and Facebook communities on this topic, in the light of theories of discourse analysis and social interaction. According to research by Royal Society for Public Health, social media has been described as more addictive than cigarettes or alcohol. Furthermore, 7 in 10 young people reported experiences of bullying, cyberbullying, among the types of anxiety diagnosis in 3 cases were observed: generalized anxiety, panic disorder, social anxiety disorder, or obsessive compulsive disorders. The increase in popularity of instant messaging applications such as WhatsApp and others can also become a problem, as they act as quick vehicles for the circulation of bullying messages and dissemination of images. Young people are twice as likely to be bullied on social media than in any other social environment. As a first analytical approach to this phenomenon, I would like to present some groups of relevant patterns found. I named support, religion, medication, pedagogy, recognition, and advertisement. Some examples for this pattern already identified was, for example, for support. Users often offer effective support to followers, to be it allegedly voluntary or professional. For example, in these comments, "Hello, do you suffer from anxiety and depression? Call me directly." Another one, "I can help you." Another one, "I am psychotherapist and I am available to listen to you." Another recurring variation of the topic of support offers relates to religious advice or mere proselytism, as in these following comments. "I had depressions and Jesus healed me, and he can heal you too." Another one, "I am evangelizing on my Instagram." Another one, "I believe in God and I'm getting better." Many followers suggest illegal ways of getting anxiety medication without a prescription. Like, all these quotes are from the field. Okay, it's data. "I can get antidepressants without a prescription for anyone who needs, if they are from BH." BH is an acronym from city, Belo Horizonte. And there are lots of dismissive comments as well. After, for example, a first-person detailed experience describing their depressive condition, some reactions undervalue their narrative with sentences like that. "Why don't you ask for help when you have crisis? This is lack of God." Or another one, "This is drama. Oh, you have nothing." Or, "You are suffering because of a man." And another, "It's all in your head." Or, "You weak." Another one, pedagogy and recognition. A great number of posts has a pedagogical approach, which offer a kind of guide for identification of depression or anxiety symptoms, fostering practice of self-diagnosis. Comments left in the chat box refer to anxiety and depression as something in common between influencers and followers. As evidence of recognition, most reactions are "me too" comments like, "Exactly. Oh, I'm just like that. That's a great truth. That's how I am. Oh, you understand, I'm just like you, that too." And the last one, I really know, my son, my daughter-in-law, and I have depression and anxiety." And the last pattern is advertising. Okay, fine, where there are people, there is money. So there are many disguised advertisement posted as a friendly and supportive comments. For example, "Go to my profile and follow me. On Monday, I will start lives about disease of the century, anxiety and depression." Another one, "Come listen to the music of Brazilians' new favorite. The song touch on themes such as anxiety and depression. Feeling that come and go, but we will win." And lots of hearts and emojis. To finish, Each of these emerging terms is widely found in the corpus empirical and points to a distinct contemporary social interaction. Each of them represents a complex set of signifiers expressing an instance of the universe of new subjectivities emerged from our times. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. And it really has me wondering, it's fairly sobering statistics that you're offering. But it really makes me wonder whether there's a relationship between depression and anxiety, and some of our prior speakers in terms of resilience. Maybe we can talk a little about that. The last presentation on this session is going to be offered by Ryan McCullough of West Liberty University, and we're going to hear about Kenneth, Burke, Alfred Korzybski, and Ontology.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Drucker. I really do appreciate my free. Can you all hear me? My screen seems to freeze. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. My screen froze there for a moment. So first off, I'm normally not a PowerPoint presentation person when speaking, but I think it's appropriate for this particular instance. And I also just wanted to thank Dr. Drucker, the previous presenters, and the Institute of General Semantics for having me here today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to present ideas to this wonderful group of people. Second, I want to state that this project is still on its journey. It's not quite at its destination. I'm still sorting through these ideas. I think the title for this panel, People in Quandaries, is appropriate because I very much feel like a person in quandaries as I'm working through this particular paper. The title of my paper is Kenneth, Burke, Alfred, Korzybski, and Ontology, Charting a Path for Understanding the Anthropocene. Really does mean, when I say the word chart, that I'm in the middle of kind of making this idea and developing these ideas. To borrow a phrase from educators Paulo Freire and Miles Horton, you make the road by walking, and I am kind of charting this path as we speak. I'll kind of run through the introduction, and then I'll talk through some of the major portions of the paper, okay? So, ontological questions ground the way in which we theorize about communication. I do not suggest that general semantics and or media ecology function as a traditional communication theory per se. Instead, I agree with the position that media ecology, especially one informed by general semantics, functions as Lance Straight calls it, an approach to understanding the human condition or our communicative lives. Since approach can encompass many terms like theory, paradigm, tradition, field, etc., media ecology as an approach with its potentially broader scope of an investigation carries with it some ontological assumptions. The goal of this paper is not to articulate all of those ontological assumptions. Instead, my goal is to reconcile some of the ontological assumptions of media ecology found in its alliance with general semantics with the rhetorical tradition. The entire Western canon of rhetoric, in one way or another, articulates and responds to Aristotle's treatment of rhetoric. Even though Aristotle's treatment of rhetoric does not necessarily have the philosophical commitments of his other works, right? Note he describes rhetoric as a counterpart to dialectic. It is not pure philosophical investigation like dialectic. He still, in the rhetoric, engages in the type of classification that he engages in other types of work. At the same time, the concerns of media ecology overlap with concerns of rhetoric. The three central figures of media ecology, Marshall McLuhan, Walter Ong, and Neil Postman, all had a concern for rhetoric. As someone who entered general semantics through media ecology and who entered media ecology through the rhetoric and philosophy of technology, I found it hard to reconcile the Aristotelian system of rhetoric and general semantics' non-Aristotelian system. But I've learned that a non-Aristotelian system does not mean anti-Aristotelian. I still find Aristotle's work central to the investigation of communication, In taking both media rhetorical and media ecology traditions seriously, in my mind, means taking both Aristotelian and non-Aristotelian traditions seriously. The following question, therefore, arises. How do we reconcile these two traditions? And therefore, this is my quandary, if you will. I believe we can find an answer to this question in the work of Kenneth Burke. Kenneth Burke, an American literary critic, scholar writ large, if you will, did not always treat, excuse me, I'll have to go back here. Prior to my introduction to general semantics, I read several of Burke's offerings: Permanence and Change, Philosophy of Literary Form, Grammar and Rhetoric of Motives, Language and Symbolic Action. But recently, I started to read Rhetoric of Religion, Studies in Logology. In discussing his concept of the negative, Burke writes, we should begin with the point that the Korzybski school of linguistics stresses so insistently, and with justice, where the formula is obvious in its principle, it is repeatedly ignored in practice. Language, to be used properly, must be discounted. We must remind ourselves that whatever correspondence there is between a word and a thing it names, the word is not the thing. The word tree is not a tree. Burke did not always treat Korzybski's ideas with generosity, but Korzybski informed much of Burke's thinking. So another question kind of moves into the foreground as well. Isn't Burke an Aristotelian? So how does Burke's orientation comport with the Korzybski's non-Aristotelian system? To answer this additional question, I believe we can turn back to the notion of ontology. Burke makes his ontology quite obvious and explicit. Burke's ontology lies in dramatism. Burke argues that we can act and understand action as critics through drama. We become players on a stage acting out the drama of life. It speaks to our human nature, our way of being, and our ontology. Given the centrality of language to our understanding our action, Burke defines man as part of his ontology in the following way. So then this is actually kind of written out as in kind of poetic form. So Burke writes, man is the symbol-using, symbol-making, symbol-misusing animal, inventor of the negative, or moralized by the negative, separated from his natural conditions by instruments of his own making, goaded by the spirit of hierarchy, or moved to the sense of order and rotten with perfection. Burke's definition gives us some of human action. Burke grounds his ontology in the belief that more than anything else, we are symbol-using animals. This distinguishes our actions from the motions of animals. In Manhood of Humanity, Alfred Korzybski also makes his ontology, or the ontology of general semantics, quite obvious and explicit. Korzybski recognizes that humans possess special capacities that other animals do not have. Humans, like other animal species, have the unique ability of, quote, time-binding faculty, time-binding power, or time-binding capacity. Put simply, our nature of being rests, according to Korzybski, in existing as a time binder. A human being is a time binder, as Korzybski writes in Manhood of Humanity. But I believe the centrality of language to both Burke and Korzybski's ontology demands further contemplation and reflection. While both Burke and Korzybski have both left us, their work is not finished. Burke admits that his definition of man demands further articulation and expansion. And as Tom Giancarelli notes, much of the work within general semantics can and should push Korzybski's writings into new scholarly directions. So taking up this cause, I use the Burkean concept of perspective by incongruity, articulated in Permanence and Change and Attitudes Towards History, and the general semantics notions of hyphens or hyphenating as a way to merge these two ontology. Through this merger, I tentatively propose a Burke-Korzybski definition of human being that offers the resources to understand the idea of the Anthropocene from an ecological and rhetorical perspective. So that in some kind of summarizes how I'm working through this particular quandary of thinking about Aristotelian and non-Aristotelian systems. So I wanted to talk a little bit about these two systems and kind of give a little bit, for lack of a better term, comparison and contrast. So as mentioned earlier, right, Burke's ontology rests on the notion of symbolic action and dramatism and symbolic action. And in other words, right, we can understand human behavior and rhetoricity through the action of using words, of using language, or of the medium of communication. Now, the other thing too is that Burke pushes off of the Aristotelian notion of rhetoric and kind of switches between what we might call an old, or what he calls an old rhetoric, or a new rhetoric, right? So for Burke, rhetoric, a tradition that had long been diminished and disregarded as purely stylistic ornamentation by philosophy and scientific empiricism rooted in philosophy, needs renewal because of its presence in all symbolic action. Renewing rhetoric requires responding to and building upon the tradition set forth by Aristotle, right? Burke distinguishes his new rhetoric with the ontology of dramatism and symbolic action from the old rhetoric of Aristotle. The difference rests upon understanding the difference between persuasion and identification. Burke writes, the key term for old rhetoric was persuasion and its stress upon deliberate design. The key term for new rhetoric would be identification, which can include a partially unconscious factor in appeal. Importantly, Burke's new rhetoric functions as a rediscovery of old rhetoric, and he reads through the classical works that originated with Aristotle. So if we were to sum up Burke's work, right, as a type of Burkeology, right, especially when considering his understanding, conception, and analysis of rhetoric, he renews and reinvigorates Aristotle, okay? In addition, right, we can also see this within his definition of man. Why does this matter? Well, the definition of man is at least implicit in any writer's comments on cultural matters. So we can compare this Burkean system to the non-Aristotelian system, which I'll kind of summarize just in 3 major points, as with the principle of non-identity, the principle of non-allness, and the principle of self-reflexiveness. So all 3 of these things, and as I argue in my paper, I'm going to kind of gloss over them a little bit for the sake of time. All of these principles both problematize and complement Burke's definition of man embedded in his ontology of dramatism and symbolic action. In fact, we can think of, the notion of definition of man as violating in some ways the principle of non-allness, right? And when he says, here's the sum total of man in terms of symbolic action. So what I do in my paper is I work through both perspective by incongruity and hyphenating to kind of merge these 2 ideas and develop something new. And I'll get to that here in a moment. So progressive by incongruity really kind of refers to Burke's methodology, if you will, right, in terms of how he approaches and understanding philosophical and rhetorical concepts, right? So it refers to the methodic merger of particles that have once been additionally considered mutually exclusive, right? So seeing where there's possibilities of Aristotelian and non-Aristotelian systems, which might seem antithetical to one another, how we might merge them, right? And we also might utilize the notion of metaphor, right, that appeals to exemplifying relationships between objects customary with our rational vocabulary might have ignored. So we can develop potentially new metaphors based upon through this perspective by incongruity. Also, I'm utilizing the notion of hyphenating, right, the principle of non-allness, so that we can kind of avoid the elementalism that might be present in Burke's definition. So based upon this idea, I developed a very tentative definition of a human being merging Burke and Korzybski. So a human being is symbol-using, symbol-making, symbol-misusing animal who binds time, who is the inventor of the negative or moralized by the negative through the use of words and the creation of maps, is separated from his natural condition by instruments of his own making and living within those instruments. Now, this goes back, I didn't have time to mention this earlier, to the principle of self-reflexivity, right? It's a recognition that we exist within these instruments as of this particular moment. We are goaded by the spirit of hierarchy or moved by a sense of order, right? Through
I think someone has to
classification, and we are rotten with perfection. In other words, we are prone to make mistakes when trying to perfect our maps, okay? So again, this is all tentative. So the implications of this. So I'm playing with, this is very, very kind of playing with Postman's notion that media ecology is general semantics writ large. My argument that I'm kind of developing here is that Burkeology, right, through analysis of symbolic action, can be a form of general semantics writ large as well, right? That thinking through symbolic action both in and of the media environment, right? So where we might interject that. When it regards to the Anthropocene, if we think of the Anthropocene as a geohistoric period in which humans are said to have become the biggest threat to life on Earth, we might think about how Burke's definition of man is implicit when we think about the Anthropocene, right? So how might symbol using contribute to this threat? But we might also ask, how might we as a time-buying symbol using animal might help to stop or rationally stop this threat? How does language, time binding, and symbolic action contribute to this threat? And if we're critiquing the idea of the Anthropocene, we might have to set up how the drama of the Anthropocene through our use of language and time binding, right? So again, these are just some tentative thoughts, some tentative implications based upon my kind of merging and thinking through the both Burke and Alfred Korzybski and how it impacts our thinking and our existence within the world. And so thank you for your time. And again, I appreciate the Institute of General Semantics for having me here.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. I have to say, well, seeing Kenneth Burke and Alfred Korzybski in the same title, you had me at the title, without whom not, has been kind of a go-to for me since graduate school. So you had me at the title. We have perfect timing. We have about 15 minutes for discussion, questions, comments. So if you want to use the icon to raise your hand or shout out, Mickey?
Yeah, can I speak? Yeah?
You're muted.
Mickey, you're muted.
You're muted.
How's that?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm wondering.
Mickey, not Milton, Mickey.
So I was very interested in the presentation by Adriana Braga because recently I've submitted a paper about the problems of calling depression and anxiety as disorders. There's evidence that I've been able to develop that they actually represent adaptations, evolution adaptations to deal with conflicts, inner conflicts of inner and interpersonal conflicts that the person has difficulty resolving using language. And I've been able to help people resolve some of these kinds of conflicts by having them be able to find ways of expressing the conflict that they're having, usually commonly one of fear and anger in combination with wanting to be accepted. That is a friendly approach, and how they can express themselves in a way that they can resolve the conflict. But when that's not possible, or when the people don't have the ability to do that, they do end up in these very terrible situations of suicide and even murder. So I suggest that it is a semantic problem that we're dealing with in calling these behavior patterns disorders. In fact, with all the efforts at identifying neurologically depression and anxiety, there has not been an ability to do that. And I think that's because those are not diseases or disorders. But if you think of them as diseases, then you think that you can find some etiology neurologically, and that's proved not possible. So I would just suggest, I think that Adriana produced a lot of evidence, actually, of what I'm suggesting. So that's my comment.
Adriana, would you like to respond to that?
No, I just to say that thank you very much for your comment, and I agree totally with you. I am now coordinator in my department for to receive people with some condition like that, and it's interesting. I said to a mom yesterday, I said the same that you said, the evolution adaptation. I said, probably this is the right subjectivity for the rest of the world, you know.
Yeah, and you know, as you pointed out, there's a lot of money to be made with all the prescriptions that are being provided that do help some people, but a lot of people are not helped by them, and especially teenagers and young adults, where
Yes,
they
they
can
have.
actually be dangerous.
Yes, they have to be listened.
Can, can I speak now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I forgot the name of the last speaker, but I'm wondering if your definition of human, is it a replacement? Is it an expansion? Is it an explanation of Korzybski's definition? Is
Yeah,
it an
thank you, Milton.
expansion?
It's Ryan, and I appreciate the question. I don't necessarily know if I'm confident enough to say replacement. I think what I kind of go back to is the notion that Korzybski lurks in the background of Kenneth Burke's definition of man. And so what I'm attempting to do is to reveal his lurking within Burke's definition as a way to illustrate the shared ontological assumptions between the two, and as a hopefully as a way to think through some of the connections between rhetoric and and media ecology and general semantics. And related to that, right? I think that you know in Manhood of Humanity, the discussion of human being as being a time binder, right? I think that kind of adding that and stating that explicitly, right, within Burke's definition of man, also kind of reminds us of, for those of us that might be coming from a more kind of rhetorical tradition, of the import of Korzybski, because I think, you know, as someone who, again, kind of came through general semantics through media ecology and came to media ecology through rhetoric, right? Korzybski honestly isn't a name that I'd encountered before, you know, that particular journey. So I think in a lot of ways I'm trying to kind of bring him up, if you will, right? Or if you want to go back to the notion of you know, McLuhan figure ground, right? You know, Korzybski's in the ground. We just can't see the figure sometimes. And so maybe by including him into that definition of man, we might be able to see the figure. Although that's something that I kind of came up with on the moment, so I don't know if I have any real philosophical commitment to that idea.
I ask because what you're doing or what you're saying is an example of time bending.
I agree. Yep.
So in that sense, time binding is something that can be recognized, can be observed. It's not I don't see it as an intentional definition, but extensional. It's what is noticeable, it's what is recognizable. It's something that we do. And you gave an example of that.
Thank you.
I think we have a couple of other comments. Heiner?
Elsa had her hand up first.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, let's go with Elsa.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to thank Olena Marina for her presentation because I do think that resilience is a capacity to educate nowadays, and not only in terrible scenarios, but in daily life relationships, in order to promote better communication between human beings. And I just wanted to thank you because I do also, I'm going to talk about resilience, and it was wonderful to hear something about it. Thank you.
Yeah. I just one thing more. Korzybski's aim, as he wrote, was the sanity, improving the sanity of the human race. And he talked about sanity in terms of adjustment. So I would like to suggest that resilience is an aspect of adjustment. We spring back from whatever is going on that is creating problem for us. We spring back from that. So I've seen resilience as springing back.
Okay, I think we have another hand up. We have Heiner, then Lance.
Yes, there's a Shayla, and Shayla, often cited by Heinrich Herre von Leipzig, coming from medicine. He spoke about general and super ontology, and I think there ontology and semantics can marry.
What was that name? What was that name again, Heiner?
Shayla. I can put it into the chat.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, and Lance?
Okay, Niels, I really find your definition of documentation quite interesting, and it certainly relates very, very much to time binding itself. But I was just wondering about connecting it to communication in general, where it seems to me that documentation requires some kind of permanence, and that we related to the idea of records, which of course brings us to the orality literacy distinction, which is, that if the baby cry, I mean, in a modern world where perhaps if it's recorded in some way, on audio video recording, sure, then it becomes a document. But in the absence of that, we tend not to consider oral tradition that is not written, that is not written down to be a document. So I was wondering how that relates to, in terms of your of this idea of documents.
Well, thanks. You are just to one of the core questions, because in the medieval age and before you had printed documents, a speech was considered as a document. A lecture was a document without being recorded. So the definition of a document as something being recorded, as being preserved, I will claim it's a modern definition. So we need simply to broaden this definition, and then we can consider and discuss what kind of documents do we need to preserve and to record. But yeah, that's sort of one of the key questions.
Thank you.
Actually, much of this in terms of following up on Lance's comment, much of what's been dealt with this entire panel has me thinking about the concept of perseverance and preservation. And so documentation, I think, is associated with preservation, certainly overcoming depression and anxiety, and dealing with the very concept of resilience. So I think it comes together very nicely, at least with lots of questions. I think we're just out of time. So I wanted to thank all of the participants for their insights, and for the members of the audience for your attention and your comments and questions. So thank you very much. And I think we have 15 minutes until the next session begins.
Yes, we do. And with this session, we crossed over from Europe to the Western Hemisphere. And Sue, you're in France actually right now. So
yes, I'm in France, so it's evening and about to be rosé time.
So enjoy your glass or two.